We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. It's important to note that there's two parts to that step. And I always tell people this, the first half of the first step is the only part where it talks about removal of drugs and alcohol. There's this other 11 and a half steps, That's why I always tell people going to detox alone is not enough. Or just saying, I'm not gonna drink this weekend is not enough. There's 11 and a half more steps, 11 and a half more things you have to do that don't have anything to do with removal of drugs and alcohol. So admitting powerlessness, right? Like a Budweiser truck passed me on the way here. I drove past liquor stores. Every restaurant I go into has a bar. That liquor, the truck, is not gonna hurt me. I'm powerless after I put it in my body. I have a decision to make. So admitting powerlessness to me is admitting it to myself. See, I will admit powerlessness to the judge, the lawyer, my parents, the prosecutor. I'll admit it to all of those people because it gets me out of the consequences. You see, it gets me out of trouble. Everybody from a jail cell will say, I admit powerlessness, I'm never gonna do it again, right? That's consequence reduction. You're trying to get out of trouble. And then what happens? Every time when we get out of trouble, things lighten up a little bit. One beer won't hurt with the game, right? So I had to admit powerlessness. Instead of telling my parents, the lawyer, the police, the judge, drug court, whoever it may be, my sponsor told me, look in the mirror and tell it to yourself. And I did that while I was at the homeless shelter. I walked in and looked in the mirror and was sitting there thinking, man, there is something wrong with me. The sum total, I was 36 when I walked in there. The sum total of 36 years of my life is that I'm in a homeless shelter with track marks in my arm. And I drink tequila to get out of bed. So I had to admit powerlessness to myself. And then the second half, that our lives had become unmanageable. Let me tell you, being sober now, there's this thing that goes on that normal people do. Their bills come due once a month and they pay them. And then they know they're gonna come again next month. So they save their money and then they pay them again, right? They're manageable. Like the kitchen's full of food, the phone bill's paid, the house note's paid, the car payments, the insurance, right? They're manageable. My shit was all over like this, right? And I'm always calling my parents to bail me out. Hey, I need food. Hey, I'm gonna be late on the rent. My phone's about to get cut off, right? It's because I was unmanageable because something else meant more to me than paying my bills, taking care of my kids, paying the insurance, and taking care of my business. Something else was more important to me. And that was my fix, my drugs and alcohol. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That was a mouthful and a mindful to me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. This power greater than myself, the God talk, right? I was spoiled on religion when I came in. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to talk about it. And if you tried to push any specific religion on me when I came in, I would leave, right? And nowadays, I don't care if you're Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, whatever. If you can do step 1 and admit powerlessness, and then you can grasp onto something in step 2 and call it your higher power, you have a chance at recovery. So it says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That first word right there, came to believe. See, I didn't know what to believe when I first came in here, right? I came to believe over a period of time that something else could restore me to sanity. It first started with the fellowship, with the people that God was placing in my life to help me, right? I came over a period of time to believe that these people knew what they were talking about and I didn't. It was that simple. And then that other word in there, believe, came to believe. See, you either believe you need help or you don't believe you need help. There is no middle of the road solution. So you believe you need help or you don't believe you need help, and you're getting ready to make decisions based on that belief. And we all know some of us are getting ready to make the wrong decision and gonna have a very bad outcome, right? So I came to believe over a period of time that something greater than me could restore me to sanity. And the way that happened is I'm sitting in the homeless shelter right down the street, and I'm looking out the window, right? The wind was blowing, the sun was coming up, there was dew on the leaves, and it dawned on me, like, leave it to me to need this, but it dawned on me, the sun just came up. And it went down last night, and I didn't cause that to happen. There's something out there that is greater than me that's causing all of this to happen. Something that's making the world go around. The universe, nature, Jesus, Buddha, whatever you believe in, whatever you want to call it. I came to believe that day sitting there that I'm not God. There's something else going on out there that I can turn my problems and my will over to, right? And that was enough. That was enough for me. It's worked for 7 years now. I wrapped my head around the fact that whatever I put into the universe is what I'm going to get back. If I'm dishonest, unfaithful, a thief, a drug addict, rob and steal, I'm going to get all of the negative consequences that thing, the universe, that thing I believe in, whatever you choose to call it, is going to give that back to me in the form of probation officers, hospital visits, handcuffs, police rides, right? Getting kicked out of your house, living in a homeless shelter, track marks. If I put that stuff into the universe, it's going to give me that back. So I came to believe over a period of time that there was something out there, be it you, the fellowship, 12-step meetings, therapy, however it comes about. There was something else out there that if I just believed it, will restore me to sanity. And it worked. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That was another mouthful for me. I didn't understand it. It had some religious terms, I thought, in it. God is not a religious term. It spans several different religions, whatever. But I heard those things in there, and all I wanted to know is, how can you help me stop living this way and start living better, right? And it says it right there. Made a decision. We are all one decision away from a better life. We are all one decision away from never using or never drinking again and never having to suffer the consequences of it, right? So made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. That was a lot to wrap my head around, but it's a very simple process that was brought to me. Once I admitted that I was powerless in step one and came to believe that you all knew what you were talking about and I didn't, it made it easier for me to receive that step 3 message. Made a decision to turn our will and I don't know what all that means, but I came to believe that you do know what it means and that you're going to show me, right? So my sponsor made it very simple. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. He said, you don't believe in a higher power, or didn't believe in a higher power. He's like, you've come to believe in nature as your higher power. He said, well, here's what I want you to do. Take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle and write is on this side and is not on this side. Doesn't have to have a name at the top. You don't have to put Jesus, Buddha, or Allah, whatever, at the top. It can be blank. So write down everything your higher power is or would be over here, and everything you think your higher power would not be over here. So on the is side, I'm writing down things like honest, truthful, faithful, dependable, hardworking, a good son, a good father, don't cheat on my girl, right? We know this stuff. It says deep down inside each and every one of us is the fundamental idea of God, right? I knew this stuff ahead of time. But once I started writing it out, okay, all the things my higher power is, then I went over here to is not. Is not is leaving the homeless shelter and asking my mom for more money. On the not side was heroin, crack, meth, alcohol, complaining, making excuses, lying, being untrustworthy, stealing. All that starts to pop up on the is not side. And I bring it back to my sponsor and say, here, I did what you said. He said, so this is everything your higher power is, and this is everything it is not. and there's no name at the top, but you didn't believe in a higher power, and this is in your handwriting. I described what I feel in my heart is my higher power on a piece of paper in my own handwriting, having not believed in it prior to that day, right? Deep down inside is the fundamental idea, right? I know the difference between right and wrong. So when I run into how do you turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him, when I run into something on the is not side, I'll turn it over to the is side. When I run into the dope man or the idea that I want to use and get dishonest and act like I'm not powerless over drugs and alcohol, when I want to lose my belief in my higher power, I turn it over to here. Honesty, truth, fellowship. I'll call you. I'll call my sponsor. I'm having a bad day and this stuff's not making sense. And they will help me distinguish the is from the is not side. And all this stuff that goes on inside my head, all this programming over years of using drugs and alcohol, programming myself to act a certain type of way, I take that and I turn it over to the other side. I get honest, truthful, follow through with the fellowship, and put some action behind it. I move over to the is side. There I am, maybe 30 days sober, having no concept of any of this prior to that day, turning my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood it. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. You know, I hear a lot of people say they leave on their 4th step. They walk away on 4 and 5, right? I mean, I knew what I did wrong. I knew it wasn't a surprise to me that I was stealing from people and manipulating my family and cheating on women. That was not a surprise. So for me anyway, I hear that and I look at it and think, you don't know all this stuff already? But step 4 for me was a way of organizing it, finding out why I do it, what my role is, and finding a way to not do it anymore, right? So I looked at step 4 and it was like, step 4 is the roadmap to what makes Sweezy homeless with track marks, right? So I'm gonna write down all of this stuff that I did. I've got sex harms. I've got fears of mine. I've got resentments. Resentment's the number 1 offender, right? Those things that make me angry. Resentment means to refeel. So the reason that I figured we have to write it down is because as I was writing out some of those things, some of my resentments with my parents, some of my resentments with other family members or friends of mine, as I was writing them down, I remembered other things that I was resentful about, right? I remembered other harms that I had caused. I remembered other sex conduct, right? So as you're writing them down, you start to remember other ones that you're not thinking of every day. And I wrote all that stuff down and looked at it with my sponsor. You know, the roadmap, this is it. The roadmap to what makes me homeless, right? And we're looking at the roadmap, and then the next thing was, I have to find out what my role in them is, right? And it's important to know for me that just because you had a role in something doesn't mean that you were necessarily wrong. Okay? There's a lot of resentments and things I had from my childhood, from arguing with my father and us not getting along, right? And sometimes my role in it was I just wasn't old enough to walk away, to get in a car and drive away. I lived there. I didn't have a driver's license. So my role in it maybe I was just there, or that I bought into it. Doesn't mean I was wrong, right? But then there's plenty, the other 99.9% of everything, I had a direct role in it where I was wrong. So I write down the roadmap to what makes me homeless. The way I treat people, the way I react to the world, the type of resentments that I carry around with me. And then I start to look at my role in them and find out where I was wrong so I can stop that behavior and not have to do it again. Right? So step 4 for me was simply the roadmap to what makes me homeless. And then I move into step 5 and I showed it to my sponsor, right? Here's the roadmap to what makes me homeless, my man. Then we look at it and he starts to tell me some of my character defects. Like I justify things a lot, right? My actions. It's okay to go flip an ounce of cocaine because rents do. I'm doing it for a good reason. Mind you, I never flipped anything, right? I ended up at the Motel 6 peeking out of the blinds and rent never got paid anyway. But I got to take the roadmap of what makes me homeless and show it to one of you all, another member of the fellowship, and let them look at it so we can then define my role in it and then try to practice not doing it anymore. So when I showed it to my sponsor on step 5, later on, through our ongoing relationship, he can turn around and look back at me and say, hey man, you're doing it again. You're doing that stuff that makes Sweezy homeless with track marks. You're doing it right now. Now what's your role in it and what are we gonna do to stop it? Without using drugs or alcohol. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And just like in 4, I hear a lot of people leave on this step right here because they don't want to tell another person about their wrongs, their sex conduct, these things they've done. And I've got some nasty, vile, disgusting, imprisonable, if that's a word, shit on my 5th step, right? And I had to find a sponsor that I trusted. That's a big thing when people come in here. I don't trust this other person. All right, you trusted the dope dealer that gave you a package full of stuff that he called heroin, and you were willing to put it in a needle and shove it into your arm and risk your life. But you don't trust this other man or woman that has 10 or 15 years of sobriety that's standing there trying to help you for free. You don't trust them to tell them about your sex behavior. I call bullshit, personally. Might be this thing where you don't want to do it, and I don't trust people that much. Now, you trusted a lot of people to give you a lot of dope, you know, and then we come around here and I don't trust them. So sponsorship, it says admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. So I already told about how in the other video, step 1, about how I admitted it to myself, right? Stood there and looked myself in the mirror. It was very simple to admit it to yourself. Bro, something's wrong with you. Normal 36-year-olds are not broke in a homeless shelter asking mom to send me a McDonald's card once a week so I don't have to eat this food. That's not normal for somebody 36 years old. It was easy to admit it to myself and sit there and look and say, I have a problem, and most of my problems center around drug and alcohol use. So I admitted it to myself, right? And then to another human being. I didn't understand sponsorship and what that meant. It took a while for it to set in, right? My sponsor right now, he's my 2nd sponsor, and he comes to my house for cookouts. He's around my kids. Elena knows him very well. I think you might know him, Big Mike. We have this friendship and this relationship where, okay, I can't take all of my drug and alcohol addict problems to my family, to non-fellowship members, people that don't understand, right? What do you get back when you do that, right? Why don't you just stop? Why don't you get a hobby? Just quit using. Don't drink. Okay, that's a lot of bad advice. Okay, it's sound advice, but there's no action behind it, right? A sponsor to me becomes a surrogate father figure, or for you ladies out there, a surrogate mother figure, right? This is somebody that has read what we talked about in step 4, the roadmap to what makes Sweezy homeless. This person has read that roadmap and knows it very well. So when I start acting a certain kind of way, this person knows how to watch their angle of approach. They know how to talk to me, and they're a former drug addict or alcoholic themselves. They've lived it. And if I'm truly working this program where I've admitted that I'm powerless and that I came to believe that something greater than myself can restore me to sanity, and then I made a decision to turn my will over to it, and then did this inventory where I look at all the wrongs I'm doing, and I take all of that and I put the trust into that sponsor. And my sponsor answers my phone calls. He knows how to receive me when I'm livid and upset. 7 years sober right now. Not having a good morning. Livid. Cussing the whole world out in my head. Haven't even ran into a single person yet. But I'm cussing all of you all out. Haven't even left my house. Haven't made it to the coffee pot yet, right? And I can call my sponsor. And he knows how to coach me through that. See, it really is a surrogate parenting relationship where they know how to receive you and calm you down. And furthermore, my sponsee, right? The first guy that ever asked me to sponsor him, Stan, I got to give him his 6-year token the other night. And I said this when I walked up there. I said, man, when you asked me to sponsor you, I said yes, but I didn't know what that meant. And every year that goes by, you keep, my sponsee, you keep teaching me what it means to be sober. You keep teaching me what it means to be someone's sponsor, you know, to be accountable to another person and help each other. So step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. The other human being part is this all-encompassing part of your life where you have a coach and a mentor, then you coach and mentor your sponsees, and together as a support group, we make it through one more day at a time without having to use drugs and alcohol. All right, steps 6 and 7, entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That's 6. 7, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings. I was lost. What do you mean, right? This is one of those things where they talk about, we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. For me, it takes place right here in 6 and 7. And there's very little information on 6 and 7. This is why there's a sponsor is so important. But I think for me, it was important to know the difference between a defect of character and a shortcoming, right? The defect of character is something that is well ingrained in me. I base my behavior on that defect of character, right? And the shortcoming is how it manifests itself in my life. I'll give you a perfect example, right? Defect of character for me, I think like a criminal. That's what it is. I have since a kid. I cheer for the bad guys in movies, right? I love mafia and gangster stuff. I think like a criminal. How does it manifest itself in my life, right? When all the bills come due and the insurance payments and the house note comes due and you have to buy food for the kitchen, right? Say, oh, I could go flip a couple ounces of cocaine and make that money. You see, my defect of character is that I think like a criminal. And then the shortcoming is how it manifests itself in my life. Going to sell dope because I need the money, which exposes another character defect of mine, justification, right? I'm justifying this behavior that actually, I love the lifestyle. I'm a dope dealer. You know, I loved all that, the bad guy in the movie. I justify that by saying, I need this money to pay my bills. So I'm right, okay? And the reason that 6 and 7, for me, separates the men from the boys is because nobody knows you're doing it except you. Right? I'm the only one that knows if I'm showing up 10 minutes early for work or 10 minutes late. Now they'll catch on. You see what I'm saying? Whenever I would go to my job out here, I worked at a local restaurant in Louisville, Kentucky here, a couple years into my sobriety. And here's how you're the only one that knows if you're really working 6 and 7, right? I would go into work every day as a manager, and the general manager there, I didn't like him. I didn't like the way he acted, didn't like the way he treated me, didn't like the way he spoke to me, right? I would go into work knowing he was going to speak to me sideways, almost inviting it and waiting for it, right? So I could argue and fight and be right. You've heard the term win the battle, lose the war, you know? So every day I knew that I was going to walk in and this guy was going to say something sideways to me. I would let it happen, argue, and then carry that resentment and walk around upset the rest of the day, the rest of the shift, and I would take it home to Elena and my girls and come in there livid about how I was treated today, about how this guy talked to me and how dare he, and I brought it home with me. You see what I'm saying? My character defect See, I was a victim. I was playing a victim. My life would be so much better if this guy wasn't here making it rough on me that I have to answer to because he's my boss, right? Truth of the matter was, I wasn't looking at the shortcoming of it. I wasn't looking at my role in it and how I was allowing it to manifest in my life, right? And once I worked with my sponsor and dug in and looked at this stuff, and my sponsor started asking me, what's your role in it, right? I'm thinking, I don't know. What's my role? I work hard. I do my job. I don't deserve to be talked to like this. He said, your role in it is that you know it's coming, you bite into it and let it affect you anyway, and then you take it home to your family. This is your fault. Whoo! So, I applied my program. Remember the roadmap that what makes Sweezy homeless? This is on the roadmap right here, playing a victim. And everything would be so much better if you all would just do things the way I say it and leave me the hell alone, right? So I had to start waking up and I had to apply that prayer and meditation. I had to start my day off, and it says, think about the 24 hours ahead. That's what that means. Oh, I'm going to go to work today and do things the right way, and this dude is going to come along at some point and try to insult me and get in my business and try to ruin the rest of my day. And I have a decision to make of whether I'm going to allow that to happen or not. Now, this is why they say we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, right? It didn't happen on the first day, but slowly over a period of time of waking up, doing my prayer and meditation, and knowing that this was going to happen when this guy was at work, I was ready for it. I go in, I do things the way I'm supposed to. Here he comes, he's going to open his mouth and throw a mop and cuss everybody out or something. And I developed this skill where I managed my own shortcoming. And when he would do that, I learned how to smile and go, whatever you say, man, and go on to work. And I didn't take it with me through the rest of my shift. I didn't take it home to my girl. I'm only accountable for my actions and how I treat people, right? I'm not accountable for the way he just treated me, and my shortcoming and my character defect. That was my fault, that I was taking that home to my family. So knowing the difference between the character defect, the shortcoming, and the idea that we're going to work, it says we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That's 100 forms of each one. This is just one example. So steps 8 and 9. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. That's 8. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. It's a lot. Sounds like a lot. So step 8, very simple, came from my step 4. I had already made the list in step 4 of the people I had harmed, and I transferred them over to step 8. Boom. Damn right, it was a good day. That was nice and easy, right? So we make this list, but it says in there, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. That does not mean that you have to make an amends to all of them right now, this very moment, to recover. Became willing over a period of time. So what we did was, my sponsor had me take out index cards, right? And I wrote down the names of all the people that I was willing to do right then and put a plus sign on the card with that name. Then I wrote down on the index cards all the people that I was not willing to do at that time and put a minus sign on. So over here on the side I was willing to do was my cousin, my best friend Kev, people that I kind of knew the result was going to come. And then on the list of people that I was not willing to do right now was my grandmother, my mother, my father, stuff I was scared to do, right? So I went through and I did 5 to start off, 5 people. I waited for the moment to approach me. I didn't sit down on the phone and force that on these people like one of my best friends, Kevin Porter. came and picked me up one day to take me to get my license back while I was in the homeless shelter. And that moment, sitting at a traffic light while no music was playing or whatever, presented itself. Just us, we're sitting here, I owe this guy an amends, I'm gonna make it. You know, and the way I was taught to make an amends is this. I tell them what I did to them. And then this one important question, how did that make you feel? And then shut up and let them talk. So I say, hey man, I did X, Y, Z to you, and I want to make it better. How did that make you feel? And just like I thought, on this list over here, the people I was willing to do, don't worry about it, man. It's all good. Forget about that money. Just keep doing what you're doing, and we'll figure it out. No problem. Say, what can I do to make it better? And Kevin's 15 years clean right now, okay? So this is a person in recovery. He dropped the coldest piece on me that I still use to this day. This was 7 years ago. He dropped the coldest piece on me that I still use to this day. When I said, what can I do to make it better? He said, what I want you to do for me is just add value to every situation you walk into from now on. He said, add value to it. Quit taking from it. When you go to the family reunion, be the one bringing food. Be the one bringing the good attitude. Being the one offering to help instead of the one that shows up and needs money. Where's the food at? What can I take with me? That's just one example. And I try to the best of my ability to use that in our situation here at Hype Studios, at Chapel Hill, Evolve Indy, RAC, these other businesses that we're working on. I try to add value. And so this recovery principle transferred over into real life, where it's like, instead of complaining about how much money I make, how about I do way more than I get paid for and see what happens? Then the unsolicited job offers and the unsolicited raises started showing up on their own. You see, he asked me to simply add value to the situations that I walk into, be it in recovery or in personal life. And by asking me to do that and me upholding my amends to him, dude, this meteoric thing on Facebook and into business and all, like I guess he does know what he was doing for me that day. Saying the only thing you have to do for me is add value to wherever you go. So that amends went really well, right? Still going well to this day. I was willing to make amends to them. And then I became willing to make amends to them all. After I did, my cousin and my friends, I became willing to do the hard ones. So I would have the index cards there with the minus signs on them, my grandmother. And again, I didn't force this on these people. I was at a family reunion, just had a baby. My first daughter, Ashlyn, was born. And there was my 80-year-old grandmother sitting on the swing out on the farm. The swing for two people. She's sitting there on the swing by herself. And I had my daughter. And my grandmother had not met my daughter yet. We just showed up. And I sat down with her. The whole family gathered around to see my grandmother meeting her first great-grandchild, right? So it's kind of a moment, very spiritual moment. I get to introduce my daughter to my grandmother. After that kind of died off and everybody went back to eating and doing whatever they were doing, there we were. The moment presented itself. I didn't force it on her. I didn't call her and try to ram this down her throat, how sorry I was. I waited for the moment to present itself. That's what I was taught to do. And we were sitting there. Hey, this is what I did to you. I scammed you out of 20 grand. And, let's be all the way honest about it. I can get honest with you all today. I knew she had early stage Alzheimer's at the time. And I was asking her for money one day and I knew she wouldn't remember it the next day. And I was taking advantage of that. So this is why I wasn't so willing to do it. This is my grandma, this is my everything, right? And I said, this is what I did to you. And how did that make you feel? And you would love my grandmother. She goes, I don't care. I'm fine. That's all she said. And she smiled and held my daughter. And I said, what can I do to make it better? And she said, I wish you would just take care of yourself. And I'm still upholding that amends to this day. I take care of myself, my family, Elena, my girls. I pay my bills. I pay my rent. I buy our food. Elena does too. She's going to watch this and be like, I pay for it too. Yes, we take care of our family today. So I became willing over a period of time to make amends to them all, right? So in step 9, it says, make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. You see how I waited for that moment when Kev was in the car and it was just us and I knew it was right? See how I waited for that moment with my grandmother sitting on the swing with my daughter, and it just felt right, like it was time for me to do this. I did it wherever possible, where it came to me and it felt right. Not whenever possible. It means you can pull out your cell phone right now and call 20 people and say, my bad. That's not an amends. That doesn't work. This is a thing where we're going to admit what we did to those people, let them talk, and then say, what can I do to make it better? And then you do whatever they said to make it better. And that's how you uphold your amends. Kevin asked me to just keep adding value anywhere I go, be it business, recovery, personal. And my grandmother said, just take care of yourself and take care of your family. And I'm still doing both of those to this day. My grandmother has now passed, and I'm at peace with what I did to her because we had a chance wherever possible to have this conversation, ask her what I can do to make it better, and I'm still doing it to this day. All right, step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it, right? You ever wake up in the morning and you're over processing all the stuff that you've done the day before, the week before, the bad decisions you made, and then you go through another day and you're still processing it at night and it keeps you awake and you can't go to sleep, all that stuff, right? Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it, promptly. So when I'm going throughout my day now and I'm exercising step 6 and 7 to the best of my ability, right? I'm gonna mess up. That's why it says spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. I'm going to mess up as I go throughout my days. I have talked to Elena wrong in sobriety. I've talked to my mother wrong in sobriety. I've gotten mad at my kids from resentments I brought home from work in sobriety, right? I was wrong. But now I have this process where I can promptly admit it, right? We can get into a heated debate, a heated argument with a coworker, with Elena, or whatever it is, and I step away from it whenever it's done or whatever, when we walk away, and I have a resentment. Resentment means to re-feel, right? So I'm replaying it in my head an hour after whatever argument or whatever happened. I'm still over processing it, right? That is my warning sign. That's the red flag. Hey, it's time to promptly admit it. So what do? We apply our process. I look at my role in it, my angle of approach, the things that I said were wrong. Whether the other person was wrong or not is not for me to determine. This is about me. I pick up the phone. We do this a lot. Sorry, Elena, but we do this a lot. I pick up the phone, call and say, I'm sorry for the way that I raised my voice or the way that I started that conversation. I shouldn't have said that. That was wrong of me. I would like to not argue. Well, what can I do to make this better, right? And she'll come right back and say, I'm sorry too. I was wrong for X, Y, Z. You know, we're both in recovery. Not everybody's that lucky, right? So I promptly admit it, right? And then when I go to bed that night, it's not spiraling around in my head like we were talking about, keeping me awake all night. And especially, I don't have to wake up with it the next morning. It says we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. If you put in this action of calling yourself out on your own BS, whenever it happens throughout the day, continue to take personal inventory, and when you're wrong, promptly admit it and go to that person and clean it up, you don't have to sleep with that stuff anymore. And I know this might be a silly example to some people, but this made sense to me, right? And this is as Sweezy sees it. This is something that came into my head. But you ever take a computer and just pull the cord, shut it off, what happens? It goes off. Okay. What happens when you try to start it back up? It's a mess, right? It's juggling. It's got a bunch of junk files in it, right? And it's got to start up. Then you got to click this and give it permission to open, and all. It's a mess, right? Same thing with this computer up here. If I don't erase all the junk files before bedtime and shut it down properly, when I try to turn it back on the next day, it's a mess, dude. 404 error, file not found, right? You know? And but when I do prayer, meditation, continue to take personal inventory, promptly admit my wrongs, and I shut this computer down properly, it's just like your other computer. When you wake up the next day and you hit the start button, what? It gets running a little bit easier. It's bloop, pops up. Here we go. Let's start our day. Right? Now that might be silly, but my brain is a computer. I have programmed myself over a period of 15 years with certain behaviors, character defects, the shortcomings pop out in my life, how I treat people. And here's the thing. The main thing I program my brain is over the last 15 years, when I don't like the way I feel, put drugs and alcohol on top of it to make it go away temporarily. This process that I'm describing for myself is the systematic reprogramming of my thinking to where when I don't like the way I feel or I've done something wrong, I have a process that I can go through and I can put it all to bed and shut it down properly without using drugs or alcohol. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. You know, when I was, my sponsor got me on this. When I was in early sobriety, he was teaching a class. That's how he became my sponsor. He was teaching this class, and they were going to let us go out to Thunder over Louisville, one of the world's largest fireworks shows. And I was in the homeless shelter, and they were debating amongst the top brass there, are we going to let them go out that weekend around all these drunks and all these people? And I was actually there when some of them were having the conversation. They were like, sure, let them hang themselves. They're going to have to learn how to do it one day. So we were all happy, right? We get to go out on Thunder over Louisville Day. We get to watch some of the fireworks from outside, right? And my sponsor did class that day. It was a Friday. And he said, let me ask you a question. How many of you are going to remember that you're powerless over this disease when you go out this weekend? Threw my hand up. So did a bunch of other people. I'm going to remember. He said, we got to talk. It says we're powerless over drugs and alcohol, not the disease. It doesn't say that anywhere. He said, I gained power back through this step work. It says praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. See, I gained some power back. I'm not powerless over the disease, right? But that's at the core of the step right there. I gained power of choice. I gained power of decision. And I use this process for clear choices and clear decision making. I have the power to say no. I have the power to make a decision to not walk into a place that's not healthy for me or walk out of a meeting that's not healthy for me, right? I have been to 12-step fellowship meetings where I felt worse after I walked out, right? I gained some power back. I don't have to stay. I can go somewhere else and hang out with people that I want to be around, right? But the main thing to know for me about step 11 says sought through prayer and meditation. Here's the thing. Regardless of who your higher power is, Buddha, Jesus, Allah, nobody cares. If you're not praying and meditating, you're not working the 12 steps. That's it. And when somebody said that to me, I was like, damn. You know, it's been probably a month at the time. It's been a month since I actually prayed in the morning and started my day off properly. I haven't meditated. And they brought it to my attention that you're not working the 12 steps, the maintenance steps, 10, 11, and 12. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, right? I don't know about you, but I watch it all the time in detox. I did it when I was in there. I try to jump from step 1 to step 9 A lot of people do. And what do I mean by that is step 9 is the amend step, right? You come in, you go to detox, and then skip over the rest of it and get on the phone and start calling people and telling them how sorry you are. I don't know about you guys, but I tried to jump to step 9 because I wanted to say, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. Will you send me $50? My motive was incorrect. I was jumping from step 1 to step 9. I went through detox and got on the phone and started trying to apologize to people. My motives were impure. My motives weren't right. I wanted to apologize to them. Remember in step 9? Whenever possible? I was doing the whenever, not wherever when it presented itself after I worked all the steps. I was doing this whenever shit, where I went through detox. Now I'm going to call you and tell you how awesome I'm doing and hope you'll forgive me and then start enabling me again. Let's call it what it is, right? It says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And it's a cliche term, but that's why they call this a recipe and not a menu, right? It doesn't do you any good to run around after a week in detox apologizing to everyone and telling them how you found God and telling them how you're never going to do that again, because you haven't done the behavioral change, right? You didn't go step 1 and admit you're powerless, right? Come to believe that this other group of people are going to help you and that you could get better. Made a decision to turn your will over. Did the searching and fearless moral inventory. Get yourself a sponsor and that roadmap, the searching and fearless moral inventory, and show your sponsor that roadmap. This is what makes me homeless, man. Help me. You know what I'm saying? Then they look at it and study it with you. Then you go through steps 6 and 7 and you identify your character defects and the shortcomings and how they manifest themselves in your life. And then you take 8 and 8, the list of all the people you had harmed, and you clean it up to the best of your ability so you can turn the volume down in your head. You know, we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. When I start cleaning all that up, then I go into 10, a daily maintenance, continued to take personal inventory, and when I'm wrong, promptly admit it. Doing my prayer and meditation on step 11 and the systematic reprogramming of my thinking. Just make decisions that won't wind me up homeless with a needle in my arm, right? Once you do that and you've had a spiritual awakening over the result of the steps, then you try to carry the message to other alcoholics. And here it is again. Practice these principles in all of your affairs. Business, personal, whatever.